Imagine opening your eyes one morning to a truth so devastating it reshapes your entire existence. Every ache in your body, every moment of mental fog, every struggle to draw breath or walk a straight line stems not from your choices but from a legacy written into your very blood, a legacy you never asked for. You learn that your parents, bound by an ancient obsession with preserving their lineage, are closer kin than nature ever intended. Your mother is your aunt, your father, your cousin, and your family tree is not a tree at all, but a snarled knot, strangling itself with every generation. This isn't a nightmare conjured by imagination. It was the reality for countless women across history, trapped in a genetic prison forged by their ancestors' pursuit of power, wealth, and divine purity. Their stories, etched in pain and resilience, reveal the human cost of a system that valued bloodlines over humanity. As we unravel these forgotten lives, we'll explore how their suffering shaped our understanding of genetics and why their voices, silenced by time, still demand to be heard. If you're moved by uncovering the hidden truths of the past, consider liking this video, subscribing, and sharing where you're watching from in the comments. It's humbling to think we're connected across the globe, piecing together these stories of survival and sorrow. To grasp the weight of these women's lives, we must first confront the warped ideology that births their torment. For centuries, European royalty clung to the belief that marrying within their own bloodlines preserved a sacred essence, a divine mandate to rule. They saw their blood as distinct, purer than that of commoners, blessed by a higher power. By the 15th century, royal families across Europe had woven themselves into a tangled web of intermarried cousins, uncles, and nieces, all in the name of consolidating power. What they couldn't foresee, what their era lacked the science to predict, was the genetic catastrophe they were crafting. Each cousin marriage, each union of close kin, stacked the odds against their descendants, amplifying harmful genes that would manifest in deformities, illnesses, and mental anguish. The Habsburg dynasty, rulers of Austria and Spain, became the tragic epitome of this self-inflicted ruin. Their motto, "Let others wage wars. You, happy Austria, marry," masked a grim reality. Their marriages were not alliances of love but calculated disasters that birthed some of history's most broken figures. Our journey begins in Madrid, 1611, within the opulent yet oppressive walls of the Alcazar Palace. A girl named Isabella Clara is born, her tiny body already marked by the Habsburg curse. Her parents, cousins of the closest degree, have passed down a legacy of genetic damage that manifests in her frail limbs and malformed jaw. As a child, Isabella struggles to speak, her words slurred by a protruding mandible that makes even eating a laborious task. Servants mash her food into soft pulps, and meals become hours-long ordeals of careful swallowing. Her spine curves unnaturally, forcing her into a stooped posture that steals her breath and confines her to cushioned chairs while other children play. Yet Isabella's physical pain is only half her burden. She grows up surrounded by gilded portraits of her ancestors, their faces mirroring her own deformities. Gretuncle with the same jutting jaw, a grandmother with a similarly twisted spine. The realization dawns slowly but cruelly. She is not an anomaly, but the latest link in a chain of suffering. Court physicians, with their leeches and incantations, offer no answers. They mutter about divine will or vague maladies, never daring to name the truth. Her body is the wreckage of generations of inbreeding. Isabella's isolation deepens as she enters her teens. Marriage, the expected path for a royal daughter, becomes a cruel mirage. Suitors, all distant cousins within the Habsburg web, visit under diplomatic pretense but recoil at her appearance. Negotiations collapse before they begin. Her deformities deemed too severe even in a world accustomed to cousin unions. She becomes a living paradox, a princess too royal to marry outside the family, too damaged to marry within it. Her days pass in dim chambers, her only companions, the books she reads and the physicians who prod her with cold instruments, documenting her spine's curve or her jaw's angle with clinical indifference. She is not a person to them, but a case. A warning of what happens when bloodlines are kept pure. Isabella dies at 29, her body exhausted by ailments her doctors could neither name nor cure. Her death certificate lists fevers and weaknesses, but the true cause remains unspoken. She was crushed under the weight of a genetic inheritance her ancestors crafted with every ill-fated marriage. From Madrid, we travel to Vienna, 1551, where another Habsburg daughter, Catherine of Austria, bears the same tainted legacy. Born to parents who were first cousins, Catherine enters the world with a body already at war with itself. Her jaw forward, her teeth misaligned, making speech a struggle and eating a chore. Her limbs tremble with a weakness that worsens with age. And by her teens, she suffers seizures that leave her crumpled on the palace floors. The court calls them fainting spells, a polite fiction to mask the epilepsy that runs through her bloodline. Catherine's suffering is not just physical. Raised in a court obsessed with divine right, she is taught her blood is sacred. Yet she sees the lie in every mirror. Her siblings too, bear the Habsburg marksome with curved spines, others with clouded minds. The palace becomes a gallery of genetic ruin, each child a testament to their parents' refusal to dilute their lineage. Catherine's sharp intellect, like Isabella's, becomes her sanctuary. She learns Latin and Greek, finding solace in philosophy. But knowledge cannot erase the truth she uncovers in her studies. Her family's obsession with purity is her curse. Catherine's fate is sealed by her role as a dynastic pawn. At 16, she is married to her cousin, King Sigismund II of Poland, a union meant to strengthen Habsburg influence. The marriage is a diplomatic triumph but a personal tragedy. Sig, himself a product of inbreeding, is cold and distant, his own health fragile. Catherine, expected to produce heirs, faces the terror of pregnancy with a body ill-equipped for it. Her first child is stillborn, her second lives only days, and each loss chips away at her spirit. Court physicians blame her, prescribing torturous treatment, spurges, bleedings, and herbal concoctions that weaken her further. The pressure to bear a healthy son consumes her, and her seizures grow more frequent, triggered by stress and exhaustion. Catherine's mental health frays under the strain, she withdraws, spending hours in prayer, her faith both comfort and torment as she wonders why God has forsaken her. Modern medicine would recognize her symptoms: depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress as the natural response to relentless trauma, compounded by genetic predispositions to mental illness. But in her time, she is simply melancholic, her pain dismissed as weakness. Catherine dies at 45, her body and mind broken by a system that saw her only as a vessel for the next generation. Our story shifts to Spain, 1665, where Maria Eugenia, daughter of King Philip IV, and his niece Mariana, embodies the Habsburg tragedy in its final, desperate throes. Born into a court where inbreeding has reached its zenith, Maria's childhood is a litany of ailments. Her jaw is so malformed she can only consume liquids. Her lungs so weak that climbing stairs leaves her gasping. Velázquez, the court painter, captures her in delicate portraits, his brush softening the truth. Her eyes are vacant, her posture strained, her small frame a fragile shell. Maria Eugenia's life is not her own. From birth, she is betrothed to her uncle, Emperor Leopold I, a marriage arranged when she is barely 3. The union is celebrated as a dynastic coup, but no one asks what it means for the child at its heart. She grows up knowing her purpose, to marry her uncle and bear children to perpetuate the Habsburg line. Her education: languages, music, dances, designed to make her a suitable bride, but her frail health betrays her. By her teens, her seizures are frequent, her speech slurred, and her body too weak for the demands of court life. Maria Eugenia's marriage at 15 is a grim milestone. Leopold, twice her age and her mother's brother, expects heirs immediately. The physical toll of pregnancy on her weakened body is devastating. Her first pregnancy ends in miscarriage. The second produces a daughter who dies within weeks. Each loss is a public failure, the court's whispers growing louder. Physicians document her decline with chilling precision: respiratory failure, anemia, neurological episodes. They never connect her symptoms to the obvious cause of inbreeding. Maria Eugenia's spirit buckles under the weight of expectation. She becomes reclusive, avoiding public appearances, her anxiety spiraling into what modern psychiatry would diagnose as agoraphobia. Her faith, like Catherine's, becomes her refuge, but it cannot shield her from the reality of her role. She dies at 20, her body collapsing after a third pregnancy ends in another stillbirth. Her death is mourned, not for her but for the heirs she failed to produce. The court moves on, blind to the truth. Maria Eugenia was not a failure but a victim of a poisoned bloodline. As we linger in the shadowed halls of the Habsburg courts, we turn to Elizabeth of Austria. Born in 1526, another daughter caught in the suffocating grip of her family's obsession with bloodline purity. Elizabeth's parents, first cousins, bestowed upon her a genetic inheritance that revealed itself early. Her teeth were misaligned, her jaw so pronounced that courtiers whispered behind fans about the Habsburg face. Her frail constitution meant frequent fevers and fainting spells, which physicians attributed to vague humoral imbalances rather than the inbreeding that plagued her lineage. Elizabeth's childhood was spent in the Hofburg Palace, surrounded by siblings who bore similar marksome with trembling hands, others with clouded minds. The palace, grand in its opulence, felt like a gilded cage, its walls echoing with the unspoken truth that her family's divine right came at a human cost. Elizabeth's keen mind, however, was her rebellion against her fate. She mastered poetry and music, finding an art of freedom her body denied her. Yet even this refuge was tainted. Her compositions, praised in private, were never shared publicly, lest they draw attention to her deformities. At 15, Elizabeth was married to her cousin, King Francis I of France, a union meant to bind Habsburg and Valois interests. The marriage was a diplomatic success but a personal crucible. Francis, himself a product of royal intermarriage, was aloof. his attention fixed on court intrigues rather than his young bride. Elizabeth's role was clear: produce heirs to secure the alliance. But her body, weakened by genetic defects, rebelled. Her first pregnancy ended in miscarriage. The second produced a son who lived only hours. Each loss deepened her isolation, as courtiers blamed her defective nature and physicians subjected her to grueling treatments, bloodletting, caustic poultices, and starvation diets that left her weaker. Her seizures, likely epileptic, grew more frequent under the strain, and her anxiety spiraled into episodes of panic that left her trembling in her chambers. Modern science would recognize these as symptoms of genetic predispositions to neurological and psychiatric disorders, exacerbated by relentless pressure. But in her time, Elizabeth was simply fragile, her suffering dismissed as a woman's weakness. She died at 27, her body succumbing to a fever that her compromised immune system couldn't fight. Her death was noted with diplomatic regret, but the true tragedy, her life as a pawn in a genetic experiment, went unacknowledged. Our journey now takes us to the glittering yet grim court of Spain in 1685, where Ana Margarita, a Habsburg infanta, carries the weight of a dynasty on the brink of collapse. Born to King Charles II himself, so inbred he was barely his cousin niece Maria Luisa, Ana Margarita's life was doomed from conception. Her jaw was so malformed she could only sip broth, her lungs so weak that a short walk left her gasping. Court painters, tasked with immortalizing her, softened her features, but their portraits couldn't hide the vacant stare of developmental delays or the hunched posture of a spine twisted by scoliosis. Ana Margarita's childhood was no childhood at all, dressed in heavy brocades that strained her fragile frame. She was paraded at court as a symbol of Habsburg continuity, her suffering masked by protocol. Her education was minimal, her mind slow to grasp even basic concepts. A fact physicians noted but never linked to the inbreeding that defined her lineage. Instead, they prescribed bizarre remedies, powders of ground pearls, infusions of viper's blood that only worsened her frailty. Ana Margarita's fate was sealed at birth. She was promised to her cousin, Emperor Joseph I, in a desperate bid to shore up the crumbling Habsburg Empire. The betrothal, formalized when she was 5, loomed over her like a death sentence. By her teens, her health was so poor that even the Habsburgs hesitated, but political necessity prevailed. At 16, she was married, her body barely able to endure the journey to Vienna. Joseph, aware of her condition, treated her with indifference, his focus on producing an heir rather than her welfare. Ana Margarita's pregnancies were catastrophic. Her first child was stillborn. Her second died within days, each loss a public humiliation in a court obsessed with succession. Her seizures, frequent since childhood, intensified, and her mental health unraveled. She became paranoid, convinced her attendants were poisoning her, a fear modern psychiatry might attribute to inbreeding-related neurological damage. Court records describe her screaming through the night, tearing at her clothes, her mind fractured by pain and failure. Ana Margarita died at 19, her body collapsing after a third miscarriage. Her death was mourned as a dynastic setback, not a human tragedy, her life reduced to a footnote in the Habsburgs' final chapter. From Spain, we move to France, 1711, where Maria Luisa of Austria, a Habsburg princess, grapples with the hidden scars of her lineage. Born to Emperor Leopold I and his niece Margaret Theresa, Maria Luisa inherited the telltale Habsburg traits: a protruding jaw, weak lungs, and a predisposition to anxiety that shadowed her from childhood. Raised in Vienna, she was taught her blood was divine. Yet her mirror told a different story, her face, a map of her family's mistakes. Her early years were marked by respiratory ailments and fainting spells, which physicians treated with futile rituals, never suspecting the genetic roots of her suffering. Maria Luisa's sharp wit was her saving grace. She excelled in languages and diplomacy, her mind a spark in a body that betrayed her. But her talents were mere ornaments. Her true purpose was to marry and bear children, a role she dreaded as she watched her siblings succumb to similar fates. At 14, Maria Luisa was married to King Louis XV of France, a union meant to cement peace between rival powers. The French court welcomed her with fanfare, but her husband, young and immature, was distant, leaving her to navigate a foreign world. Alone, her role as queen demanded heirs, but her genetic inheritance made pregnancy perilous. Her first child, a daughter, died within months. Her second pregnancy ended in miscarriage. Each failure fueled court gossip, with nobles whispering of a cursed Spanish bride. Physicians subjected her to invasive examinations, blaming her feminine defects while ignoring the inbreeding that undermined her health. Maria Luisa's anxiety deepened, her nights plagued by panic attacks that left her trembling. She turned to charity, funding hospitals and orphanages, seeking meaning beyond her reproductive failures. Modern analysis would suggest her anxiety, depression, hormonal imbalances stemmed from genetic vulnerabilities amplified by stress. But in her era, she was simply nervous, her pain a private burden. Maria Luisa died at 31, her body worn out by a final failed pregnancy. Her death was overshadowed by political maneuvers, her suffering erased from the annals of Versailles. To understand the full scope of these tragedies, we must delve into the science that explains their pain. Inbreeding, as the Habsburgs practiced it, is a genetic minefield. When close relatives reproduce, their offspring are more likely to inherit two copies of harmful recessive genes defects that, in a diverse population, would be masked by healthy variants. Over generations, as cousins married cousins, these harmful genes accumulated, a process called inbreeding depression. The Habsburg jaw, or mandibular prognathism, became a visible symbol of this damage, growing more severe until some descendants couldn't chew or speak clearly. But the jaw was merely the surface. Beneath it lay a litany of invisible wounds: epilepsy, intellectual disabilities, immune deficiencies, and psychiatric disorders like depression and anxiety. Fertility suffered, too, with high rates of miscarriage and infant mortality, as genetic incompatibilities made healthy reproduction nearly impossible. The Habsburg women, from Isabella to Maria Louisa, were not unlucky. They were inevitable casualties of a system that ignored nature's warnings. The psychological toll was as devastating as the physical. Women like Elizabeth and Ana Margarita grew up knowing their value lay in producing heirs, yet their bodies betrayed them. Each miscarriage, each deformed child, was a public failure, compounding their shame and fear. Many developed anxiety disorders, depression, or post-traumatic stress, conditions worsened by genetic predispositions to mental illness. Court physicians, blind to genetics, treated these symptoms as moral failings or divine punishment, prescribing treatments that often did more harm than good. The Catholic Church, which could have halted these unions, instead granted deeming royal bloodlines sacred. Even the women themselves, raised to believe in their superiority, sometimes perpetuated the cycle, marrying cousins in hopes their children would escape the curse. They didn't know their prayers were futile, their suffering a direct result of choices made centuries before. The Habsburg experiment in inbreeding reached its grim climax with Charles II of Spain, who died in 1700, impotent and broken, his body a living testament to genetic collapse. His sisters and cousins, the infantas, suffered even more, their lives a catalogue of epilepsy, developmental delays, and physical frailty. Yet their pain wasn't meaningless. The meticulous records of their ailments, preserved in court archives, became a cornerstone of modern genetics. Scientists studying the Habsburgs uncovered the mechanics of recessive genes, inbreeding depression, and hereditary diseases, knowledge that has saved countless lives. The women we follow: Isabella, Catherine, Maria Eugenia, Elizabeth, Ana Margarita, Maria Louisa were more than victims. Their suffering, documented in excruciating detail, helped humanity understand the necessity of genetic diversity. Their stories carry a deeper lesson, one that resonates beyond royal courts. These women were reduced to their reproductive roles, their worth measured by their ability to produce heirs. Their individual dreams, fears, and talents were irrelevant to a system that saw them as tools. This dehumanization isn't confined to the past. Across history and into today, women have been valued for their fertility, their autonomy sacrificed for cultural or political ends. The Habsburg tragedy is an extreme case, but its echoes linger in communities where cousin marriage persists, risking similar genetic consequences, and in societies where women's worth is tied to motherhood. These stories remind us to prioritize human dignity over tradition, to value individuals over ideologies. In their pain, we find resilience. Isabella found freedom in books, Catherine in philosophy, Maria Louisa in charity. They asserted their humanity against a system that denied it. Their legacy is both tragic and redemptive. Tragic because their suffering was preventable, redemptive because it taught us to reject the pursuit of purity at the cost of compassion. As we remember them, we honor not their titles, but their humanity, their courage in enduring a fate they didn't choose. Their voices, silenced by death, still speak, urging us to learn from their pain, to ensure that no one is sacrificed for the sake of bloodline or power. They remind us that true nobility lies not in genetic purity but in our shared humanity, in the courage to choose love over lineage, compassion over control.